8:22 is the time on the clock. Welcome to the 40-minute run this particular morning. We are speaking on developments that happened this weekend in the Middle East. Now, according to sources, it cost Israel more than $1 billion to activate its defense system that intercepted Iran's massive drone and missile attack overnight, according to a former financial advisor to Israel's military, that's Brigadier General Reem Aminoach, who highlighted that the staggering price tag stands in contrast to the relatively low amount that Iran had spent to launch its assault, which some estimates have put at less than 10% of what it cost Israel to stop the attack. Now, Iran launched more than 300 drones and missiles towards Israel on Saturday in response to an Israeli attack on its consulate in Syria that killed 2 senior Revolutionary Guard commanders earlier this month. Israel said its military forces and its allies had intercepted 99% of the missiles, but some ballistic missiles penetrated Israelis' defenses and hit the Nevatim Airbase in southern Israel. To speak to us more on this, including other developments, we are joined by Ambassadors Tuliameni Kalomo as well as Kaire Mbwende. Ambassador Kalomo, to you a very good morning.
Good morning, sir.
And to you, Ambassador Mbwende, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Perhaps to start with you, Ambassador Kalomo, is this something we expected, that Iranian attack over the weekend?
Yes. The moment the Israelis have attacked the Iranian consulate in Syria on the 1st of April, killing several Iranian officials, including, I understand, 2 senior generals, the retaliation by Iran was inevitable. It was a question of when, and now what happened over the weekend simply told us where and when. But it was inevitable that Iran will retaliate.
And where does this put the context of the war in the Middle East, Ambassador Mbwende?
Come again?
In which context does this leave that conflict in the Middle East now with the developments over the weekend?
Yes. Well, the development over the weekend is, I think, is significant in the sense that the Iranian attack was not on Israeli interest or American interest established in some way, but directly on Israel. But the same thing also applied to the Israeli attack on the Iranian consulate, because that is a sovereign territory, and therefore it's really an infringement on their sovereignty. And the risk of a state-to-state confrontation is high now, even though there are efforts to avert it. But I think it's a new dimension that, it's a direct attack on the territories of both countries.
Indeed, and while those attacks and those missiles were flying over and into the Israeli territory, we saw many leaders come on and show support either to Iran or to Israel over the weekend and during that period. Ambassador Kalomo, what does that mean for the amount of military attack that leaders are willing to put out there, leaders are willing to show in case of any threat to its allies?
Well, first of all, the state of Israel is the creation of Britain through this Balfour Declaration of 1917. Secondly, the present Israeli state, created after the Second World War, created in 1948, was the creation of the Americans. And the United States regard Israel as the first state of the United States. Israel will not exist without economic, financial, and military and technological assistance from the United States. Therefore, when the Americans realized that the Iranians were mounting this barrage of missiles and of all kinds and drone attacks against Israel, they mobilized their own forces. They mobilized Britain and France, and they launched a coordinated response to bring down the Iranian projectiles. Therefore, you can see the interconnectedness between the strategic, political, and economic interest of the United States and Britain and those of Israel against the Arabs, against Muslims. And therefore, there was no surprise that the majority of those Iranian missiles and drones were brought down by the Americans and the British before they could reach the airspace or territory of Israel.
And on that point, Ambassador Mwende, if the U.S. were to attack Iran, Iran did say that, or they promised rather, to retaliate against every country with the U.S. presence in the region, and that includes, the UAE, Oman, Qatar, Kuwait, etc., etc. So in the long term, the U.S. would and could reduce Iran to rubble, but smart by the Americans to not attack Iran because it would come to the total obliteration of their allies in the region.
Well, that's correct. Because the Iranians will know no limit in terms of their response and retaliation. So would be the Israelis. While they have vested interest in terms of maintaining Israel as a state, its military superiority or otherwise, I think that to a certain extent reason will prevail not to allow an all-out war between the parties. But the likelihood of that happening can be easily triggered by a small incident. This is what most wars really sometimes are triggered by a small incident, and then they escalate beyond the control. But I believe that there is vested interest in not allowing an all-out war, as long as Israel continue to survive and thrive, and Iran also. But the Iranians will do everything within their power should the Israelis, because the Israelis now are contemplating a retaliation, and that retaliation could mean anything. It could be what we tried in Gaza to say that, well, let's destroy Iranian military capability, and or can be strategic targeted at certain installations. Now, that is it may, depending on the attack and the response thereto, we may end up in an all-in-all situation. But I still believe that there is still a bit of scope for diplomacy, even though there is no direct communication between the Iranians and the Israelis, and the Americans, of course, are doing it through their allies that also maybe talk to Iran.
Indeed. Ambassador Kalomo, on that point, what does a possible Israeli retaliation look like?
Well, we cannot say for certain how the Israeli retaliation would look like. But I believe, the Israelis, with the support of the Americans, have created this myth of the Israeli military invincibility, that they are all powerful. That invincibility has been demolished by the resistance of the Palestinian people in Gaza, who resisted for more than 6 months now, without any access to reinforcement, military or human, but they resisted successfully. The Israeli, I mean, when you look at the scale of massive destruction of the Gaza Strip and the desire for the Israelis, for the Palestinians to surrender, but the Palestinians in Gaza refused, stubbornly refused to surrender and continue to fight. Now, the acquisition by other countries, including Iran, of sophisticated military hardware has demolished that, contributed to the demolition of the myth of Israeli and American invincibility. So they are not unlimited in what they can do. They are not unlimited. The desire, the urge of the Israelis is to prevail. But that freedom to prevail, to always prevail, is slowly coming to an end. Other countries have acquired the technology, the will to fight, and therefore what shall be left is really to find a negotiated solution to the problem of Palestine. If we can address, find a settlement to the decolonization of the Palestinian territories, then the problem in the Middle East would diminish.
Ambassador Kalomo, I do know that you have to leave us soon, so by any means...
Go right ahead. We still have time. Go right ahead.
All right. Ambassador Mbwende, perhaps just to come into your side and to speak on the machinery in actual fact that Ambassador Kalomo was referring to. The Iranians did not appear to make use of hypersonic missiles, and this was after demonstrating the range and the speed of those days before the attack, almost playing a 2 when they had an ace in their deck. Is this also to show that they could do worse, the Iranians?
Well, there's no doubt that Iranian full capacity has not been put to the test yet. So they have greater capability than what they were able to demonstrate. And so one really would... now, I believe that even the supporters of Israel don't think that a military solution is a solution to the problem of the Middle East. Its solution ultimately will lie in the diplomatic effort, and of course based on the principle of granting full sovereignty to the people of Palestine. But in terms of balances of forces, you cannot say who has more than who, but in any case, there will be massive destruction coming from both sides.
Do we see any form of a settled solution in the short term, Ambassador Kalomo, especially after what we saw from the UN Security Council about a month ago now, and now all of a sudden this retaliation from Iran sort of changes the complexity of the situation in the Middle East, the situation in Israel and Gaza in particular. Do we see any short-term solution from international forces moving forward, or is this yet just another cycle of more violence, more international threats, more tension between forces and countries moving forward?
I think sadly we don't see a solution in sight, because there are two contradictory solution that is being sought. The Palestinians want the full realization of freedom and independence. The Israelis want complete capitulation of the Palestinians and the creation of an appendix or appendage of the Palestinian territories and the complete clutch, complete control of Israel. there are reports of massive gas discoveries around Gaza and around the West Bank. And the Israelis have also discovered massive gas deposits. But the Israelis and the Americans have no respect for the human right, fundamental human rights. And which are these? The right to be free, the right to be independent, and the right to exercise sovereignty in the state of Palestine by the Palestinian people. Therefore, as long as you have those contradictory wishes for the Israelis and the Palestinians, there is unfortunately no end in sight. But the world is changing. The generations are changing, both in America, which supports and sustains Israel, and among the Arab. Although right now we can say that the Arab governments have been completely cowed by Israel, and they have submitted their sovereignty. We could see when the Iranians launched their attacks, even the Jordanians joined in the with the Americans and the British in defense of Israel. The Jordanians, the Lebanese closed their airspace. The Iraqis and the Syrians have no control over the airspace. So the Americans and British attacked the Iranian missiles with impunity over Syria and over Iraq. The Lebanese also closed their airspace. So right now, the Arabs are completely submitted to the diktats of the Israelis. But this is a temporary kind of situation. No people would ever surrender their right to be free.
Ambassador Bwende, your thoughts just on that short-term move going forward by all forces involved?
Well, I think I would concur with Ambassador Kalomo that there is no short-term solution in sight. We may witness a protracted war, and which will cause a lot of destruction. But at the end of the day, you are dealing with two forces: the one that is determined to get its sovereignty, and the other one that wants to perpetuate domination. And goodwill by a third party so far does not exist. We have the two systems, that is the Israelis with their supporters on the other hand, and then the people of Palestine on the other. But a short-term solution, I don't see it. But we have seen some initiatives in the past where you don't expect it, but at the moment we don't see how and where it's going to come from.
Just as we start winding down our time with the both of you gentlemen, we still haven't seen Israel retaliate. We did hear on Saturday that they say they would do that in 48 hours. Netanyahu still hasn't done anything big. Is that a sign of fear, perhaps, or is that a sign of just a lot of calculation that has to be done from the Israeli head? Ambassador Kalomo.
Well, right now the Israelis are under tremendous pressure not to retaliate. But they are all international pressure from the American, the British, the Allies, not to retaliate. But they are also under tremendous political pressure domestically to retaliate. So I suspect that they may not retaliate immediately, but I suspect they will retaliate. We do not know what the form of their retaliation. But the retaliation, I think they will. They will. They will.
Ambassador Mbwende, your thoughts on that?
Yes, sorry. No, definitely. They, of course, they calculate, and the retaliation, I'm sure, will be calculated. What they would have preferred is the issue of if they have absolute military superiority, maybe to destroy Iran's capability. And I don't think that they are contemplating that or they can do that. So then they have to be strategic in terms of how and when. But one should expect that retaliation to happen. I wouldn't say how soon, because, no general would announce when he will go to war, because the other one will prepare. Normally retaliation is a surprise move.
Indeed. Well, Ambassador Kalomo, Ambassador Mbwende, we do thank you so much for making some time for us and adding context to this matter. It's still developing, so we'll see how all of this does pan out. But for your time this morning, gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Indeed. Ambassadors Tuliameni Kalomo and Kare Mbwende, while just giving us a bit more context on this matter, that while this development that took place this weekend, as the number of missiles the Iron Dome had to deal with in Israel's capital of Tel Aviv was massive, really 300 plus missiles, they do say, that they had to deal with. And the massive scale of attacks, 310 weapons, they say. And we did see Britain's Foreign Affairs Minister or Foreign Affairs Secretary, that's David Cameron, coming out to speak on this matter. Let's just hear what he had to say regarding this.
The first thing to reflect on is the massive scale of the attack that Iran attempted on Israel. It was 301 weapons, 110 ballistic missiles, 40 cruise missiles. This was very significant. And so, of course, if you're sitting in Israel this morning, you're thinking quite rightly, we have every right to respond to this, and they do. The first thing to
and every right to respond is a question on when and how they will do it. It's a question that I did ask Ambassadors Tuliameni Kalomo and Kare Mbwende. The retaliation is going to happen, they say, but when and how it's going to happen is something that we don't know yet. This is coming live from Al Jazeera now. There are live updates as U.S. rules out joining Israeli attack against Israel. The U.S. has ruled out joining any Israeli counter-attack against Iran. Officials said as Israel's war cabinet concluded a meeting reportedly without a decision on what action to take in response to Tehran's first direct attack against the country. Israeli forces again bombed the Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza, killing 5 and wounding dozens as the UN Security Council met to discuss Iran's retaliatory strikes against Israel. Now, UN Secretary General, that's Antonio Guterres, called for de-escalation at the UN Security Council meeting and said that the world could not afford another war in the Middle East. At least 333,000 Palestinians have been killed and 76,000 wounded in Israel attacks on Gaza since October 7th. The death toll in Israel from Hamas's October 7th attack stands at 1,139, with dozens of people still being held captive. More from Al Jazeera, as a Palestinian mother bid farewell to a young daughter after a bullet shot by Israeli forces hit her face, according to footage posted on social media by Palestinian photographer, that's Atia Darwish. The girl's mother, they say in the picture, can be seen crying on this particular issue. So a lot happening in the Middle East still. Failed attack was double defeat for Iran, says David Cameron, as UN warns of devastating conflict. Iran revealed its malign nature with its attack on Israel. Cameron told Sky News it comes after the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned the Middle East real danger of devastating full-scale conflict. That's the latest that we are getting there. The BBC also just reporting again the US says that it won't join in a counter-attack or counter-retaliation rather to and against Iran. The White House having warned Israel that the US will not participate in any retaliatory strikes against Iran, according to senior administration officials there. This comes, as I mentioned, after those 300 drones and missiles were fired at Israel overnight, which Iran said was in response to an April 1st strike on its consulate in Syria. Almost all weapons were shot down by Israeli, US, and allied forces before they reached their target. That magnificent piece of warfare called the Iron Dome assisted a lot in that. The US also assisted in that. From what we saw over the weekend, the British forces assisted in that as well. But officials saying Joe Biden urged Israel to consider its response carefully. Speaking to reporters on Sunday, a senior administration official said that Biden told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to think very carefully and strategically about how his forces replied to unprecedented action, the first direct attack by Iran on the country. Now, the official added that Biden administration believes that Israel got the best of it in the exchange, which began when senior Iranian military commanders were killed at an Iranian consulate building in Syria. Now, about 99% of the missile drones and the cruise missiles launched during Iran's retaliatory operation were shot down or intercepted, which U.S. officials point to as a sign of Israeli military superiority over Iran. That debate is still going on wildly out there on who has the superior military capabilities. U.S. aircraft and naval vessels shot down dozens of Iranian projectiles as the attack took place, while more than 80 drones and at least 6 ballistic missiles were downed by U.S. aircraft and vessels or by air defense forces over Iraq. This included 7 drones and a ballistic missile as they prepared to launch from Yemen. U.S. Central Command added in an update on Sunday. Now, a conversation took place between Biden and Netanyahu at the time of heightened emotion just after the attack, which included about 100 ballistic missiles simultaneously flying towards Israel. Now, this is still coming from the BBC, saying during the call, the two leaders had a discussion about how to slow things down and think through things, with Biden emphasizing that Israel has gotten the best of it. The official declined to say, however, whether the White House warned against a significant response, saying only that it is a calculation that Israelis have to make. In a string of television appearances on U.S. network earlier in the day, National Security spokesman, that's John Kirby, repeatedly said that the U.S. had made it clear to Israel that it seeks to avoid a wider conflict. The senior administration said the same message has been sent to Iran through diplomatic channels. So we then see Kirby and this official saying that the U.S. will continue to defend Israel, as Biden had come out and said the exact same thing, as well as their Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying the exact same thing, but has ruled out participating in any Israeli response. So the stance is one that has sparked a bit of criticism from some U.S. lawmakers, some former officials, both sides of the political spectrum, whether they're left or right, Republican or Democrat. I mean, Ohio Republican representative, that's Mike Turner, who served as a chair of the House's Intelligence Committee. He said that Kirby's comments about de-escalating the conflict were wrong. To quote him here, he says, it's already escalating and the administration needs to respond. On the other hand, John Bolton, who served as the national security advisor under Donald Trump, he said that the U.S. should join Israel if it's chosen to launch a retaliatory attack on Iran's nuclear program. And in the wake of Israel's attack, or the attack on Israel rather, we saw Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, saying that the body would try again to pass military aid for Israel. We've seen previous attempts to send more aid to Israel having stalled amid those democratic calls that the aid package should also include assistance for Taiwan and for Ukraine. Mike Baldry has come out. He's a former Deputy Secretary for Defense in the Middle East. He told the BBC that the aid for Israelis should be passed without delay. So that's essentially the position of the United States right now. They're saying that we're always in support of the Israeli government, of any Israeli defense, but in terms of retaliation, we don't want to get involved. We don't want to widen the conflict. Let's calm down. Let's de-escalate. But Netanyahu promising that he would respond in 48 hours. It's almost been 48 hours now. Still no response from Benjamin Netanyahu, and we will see how all of that does pan out in the next couple hours, or maybe days, or maybe months. Who knows what it may look like. 8:52 is the time on the clock. You can call us in at 061-279-644. Just start winding down the show. 061-279-644. The phone lines are open. Let us know what you think of this situation in the Middle East and of the stories we've given you throughout the day.